They say that when you're drowning, your whole life flashes before your eyes. But what they don't tell you is what happens when you're drowning in someone else's lies, and the life flashing before your eyes isn't even real. My name is April, and I'm about to tell you the story of how I died and was reborn, because a man I trusted decided to play God with my heart. But here's the thing about playing God. The universe has a way of reminding you exactly who's really in charge, and sometimes divine justice comes in ways you never see coming. Asterisk. At 42, I had become an expert at pretending. Pretending that my marriage wasn't a cemetery of dead dreams. Pretending that the man I'd once loved hadn't become a stranger who criticized everything I did. Pretending that I was fine when my children, Emma and Lucas, asked why Mummy and Daddy never smiled at each other anymore. 15 years of trying to breathe life into something that had died so slowly, I hadn't even noticed when it stopped moving. April, the dishes aren't done, Michael would say, not looking up from his phone. Never looking up from his phone. I just got home from work, I'd reply, but my voice had lost its fight years ago. It came out flat, defeated, like everything else about me. Well, they're not going to do themselves. This was our marriage. A series of obligations and criticisms wrapped in the rotting fabric of what we used to call love. I had become invisible in my own life, a ghost haunting the house I'd once called home. The worst part wasn't the loneliness, though. God knows I was lonely. The worst part was watching my children learn that this was what love looked like. Emma, now 13, had stopped bringing friends over. Lucas, 11, had developed a stutter that only appeared when his father was in the room. I knew I had to leave. I'd known it for months, maybe years. But knowing and doing are two different countries, and I'd been living in the space between them for far too long. That's when I noticed Adam. Adam Richardson worked in the marketing department, 3 floors down from my accounting office. I'd seen him in the elevator, in the cafeteria, at company meetings. He was handsome in an understated way, sultan-pepper hair, kind eyes, and a smile that seemed to hold secrets. But it wasn't his looks that caught my attention. It was the way he looked at me. "You always seem lost in thought," he said one Tuesday afternoon, as we waited for the elevator. "Penny for your thoughts." I found myself smiling, actually. Smiling for the first time in months. "They're not worth even that much, I'm afraid." "I doubt that very much." The elevator doors opened, and he gestured for me to enter first. "A woman with eyes like yours must have thoughts worth more than pennies." It was a simple compliment, nothing earth-shattering. But when you've been invisible for years, even the smallest acknowledgement feels like sunlight after an endless winter. Our conversations started small: weather, work, the terrible coffee in the break room, but gradually they deepened. Adam had a way of asking questions that made me remember I was more than just someone's wife and mother. He was interested in my opinions, my dreams, my fears. "You're unhappy," he said one day, and it wasn't a question. I should have deflected, should have given him the standard response about how everything was fine. Instead, I found myself telling him the truth. "I feel like I'm disappearing," I whispered. "Like I'm becoming smaller and smaller until one day I'll just not exist anymore." He reached across the table and covered my hand with his. "You exist, April. You're more real than anyone I've ever met." That night, I went home and told Michael I wanted a divorce. The divorce wasn't pretty. Michael fought me on everything: custody, finances, even the kitchen table we'd bought together 12 years ago. He couldn't understand why I was throwing away our family for what he called selfish reasons. "You're having a midlife crisis," he accused during one particularly brutal mediation session. "You'll regret this." Maybe he was right about the regret, but I knew I'd regret staying even more. Adam was my lifeline during those dark months. He listened when I cried about the lawyers. He made me laugh when I thought I'd forgotten how. He helped me remember that I was worth more than the scraps of affection I'd been accepting for so long. "You're so brave," he told me one evening as we sat in his car outside the courthouse. "I've never known anyone as brave as you." I didn't feel brave. I felt terrified, broken, like I was free-falling without a parachute. But Adam made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I could learn to fly. Our relationship deepened slowly, carefully. He respected that I needed time to heal, that I had children to consider. He was patient when I pulled away, understanding when I had moments of doubt. "I've never felt like this before," I admitted to him one night, 6 months after my divorce was finalized. It scares me. Love should scare you, he said, pulling me closer. It means it matters. Love, the word hung in the air between us like a promise. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to hope. I have some news, Adam said, his voice strange and distant. We were sitting in our usual spot at the coffee shop near my office, but something was different. He wouldn't meet my eyes. What kind of news? I asked, though something in my stomach was already clenching with dread. I'm being transferred to London. The company is expanding their European operations, and they've offered me a position as regional director. The words hit me like a physical blow when next month, after a year of slowly rebuilding my life, of learning to trust again, of believing that maybe I deserved happiness after all he was leaving in a month. I don't understand, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. This is so sudden. You never mentioned, I know. He finally looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Guilt. I didn't expect them to move so quickly on it, but I thought we were. I couldn't finish the sentence. What were we? What had I thought we were? We are, he said quickly, reaching for my hand. This doesn't change anything between us, April. I want you to come with me. Come with you. The suggestion was so absurd I almost laughed. Adam, I have children. I have a life here. I can't just. You can. His grip on my hand tightened. We can make it work. You and the kids. We can be a family in London. I'll take care of everything. A family. The word I'd been too afraid to even think, let alone say out loud. But now, with him leaving, with my world shifting beneath my feet again, he was offering me everything I'd been afraid to want. How would that even work? I asked, hating how desperate I sounded. I'll get settled first, he said, his voice gaining confidence. Find us a place to live, get everything set up. Then you can bring the kids over. We can start fresh, all of us. Start fresh. It sounded like paradise and terrifying uncertainty wrapped in the same package. I said yes. Of course, I said yes. Because when you've been drowning for 15 years and someone throws you a life preserver, you don't ask questions about where it came from. You just hold on tight and pray it's real. I should have asked more questions. I should have wondered why a man who claimed to love me had never told me about a job opportunity that would take him across the ocean. But I was so desperate to believe in happily ever after that I ignored every red flag waving in front of my face. Adam left on a Tuesday. I remember because Emma had a soccer game that evening, and I sat in the stands pretending to watch while my heart felt like it was being slowly torn from my chest. The first few weeks were hard but manageable. Adam called every day, sometimes twice. He told me about his new flat in Camden, about the office with its view of the Thames, about the schools he was researching for Emma and Lucas. I found the perfect house, he said during one of our nightly calls. 4 bedrooms, a garden for the kids, and there's a cafe down the street that serves the best coffee I've ever tasted. You'll love it. I lived for those calls. They were my anchor in the storm of single motherhood, work stress, and the constant doubt that whispered in the back of my mind that I'd made a terrible mistake. When can we visit? I asked, during our 3rd week apart. Soon, he promised. Still getting settled. You know how it is. New job, new country. But soon, I promise. Soon became later, it's complicated. There was always a reason why it wasn't the right time. Work was demanding. He was having visa issues. The housing market was crazy. I miss you, I told him one night, and the words felt like they were being dragged from somewhere deep inside me. I miss you too, he replied, but there was something in his voice, a distance that had nothing to do with the ocean between us. Months passed. Christmas came and went with promises that we'd spend the next one together in London. Emma started asking why her new daddy never visited. Lucas stopped asking about him altogether. I was beginning to feel like I was drowning again, but this time in doubt instead of despair. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday in March. I was scrolling through social media during my lunch break when I saw a tough photo that made my blood turn to ice. That was Adam, in London, at what looked like a company party. He was smiling, his arm around a woman I'd never seen before. A woman who was wearing a wedding ring. A woman who was leaning into him like she belonged there. The caption read, "Great night out with the London team. Thanks to my amazing wife Sarah for putting up with these work events." Wife. The word exploded in my brain like a bomb, destroying everything I thought I knew about my life. I stared at the photo until my eyes burned, searching for some explanation, some context that would make this make sense. But there was no mistaking what I was seeing. Adam, my Adam, the man who had promised to build a life with me, was married. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through more photos. There they were at Christmas, opening presents with 3 children who looked exactly like him. There they were on vacation, Sarah's pregnant belly visible beneath her summer dress. There they were at a school play, proud parents cheering from the audience. How long had he been married? How long had I been living a lie? I ran to the bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left but bile and the bitter taste of betrayal. I hired a private investigator that afternoon. Patricia Mills was a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. She listened to my story without judgment, taking notes in a small leather notebook. "How long do you think this has been going on?" she asked when I finished. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe the whole time. Maybe since before I even knew him." "We'll find out," she said, her voice matter-of-fact. "It usually takes about a week to get a complete picture." The longest week of my life. When Patricia called me back, I was in my kitchen making dinner for the kids. Emma was doing homework at the table, and Lucas was building something elaborate with Legos. It was a normal moment in what had become a very abnormal life. "April," Patricia's voice was gentle but firm. "You need to sit down." I sat. "Adam Richardson has been married to Sarah Richardson for 18 years. They have 3 children together, ages 16, 14, and 12. The family moved to London together 6 months ago for his job transfer. 18 years. He'd been married for 18 years. 3 years longer than my marriage to Michael had lasted." "There's more," Patricia continued. "I found records of at least 2 other women he's been involved with over the past 5 years. Both long-term relationships. Both ended when he moved away for work." The phone slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. "Mom," Emma looked up from her homework. "Are you okay?" I wasn't okay. I would never be okay again. The next few weeks were a blur of pain so intense I couldn't think, couldn't eat, couldn't function. I called in sick to work and spent my days in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how someone could do this to another human being. Every memory was poisoned now. Every sweet word, every promise, every moment of happiness, all of it was a lie. I had been nothing more than a game to him, a distraction from his real life. "Mommy, why won't you eat?" Lucas asked one evening, his small face creased with worry. I couldn't answer him. I couldn't explain that food tasted like ash in my mouth, that my heart hurt so badly I was afraid it might actually stop beating. Emma tried to be strong, taking care of her brother, making sandwiches for their school lunches, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She was 13 years old, and she was watching her mother fall apart. I had failed them. I had failed myself. I had torn apart our family for a man who had never even existed. The worst part was the silence. Adam had stopped calling completely. When I finally worked up the courage to call him, his number was disconnected. His work email bounced back. He had erased me from his life as completely as if I had never existed. But I had existed. I had loved him. I had believed in him. I had rebuilt my entire life around the promise of a future with him. And it had all been a lie. I don't know how long I had been lying there when I heard it. I was in that space between sleeping and waking, that liminal place where dreams and reality blur together. The voice was gentle but firm, neither male nor female, but something beyond both. "April." I opened my eyes, but my bedroom was empty. The clock on my nightstand read 3:17 a.m. "This is your test," the voice continued, and I felt it more than heard it, like a vibration in my bones. "All of this, the pain, the betrayal, the breaking, this is your test." I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. "What test?" "To see if you will rise or if you will fall. To see if you will let this destroy you or if you will let it remake you into who you were always meant to be." Tears were streaming down my face now, but for the first time in weeks, they weren't tears of despair. "I don't know how," I whispered. "You do know. You have always known. You are stronger than you think, braver than you feel, and more powerful than you can imagine. But you must choose. You must decide who you want to be." The presence faded, but the words echoed in my mind long after the voice was gone. I got up and went to the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face. In the mirror, I saw a woman I barely recognized, hollow-eyed, gaunt, broken, but beneath the damage, I saw something else. I saw a survivor. Asterisk. The next morning, I got up and made breakfast for my children. Real breakfast pancakes, bacon, fresh, fruit. Emma stared at me in amazement. "You're up," she said, as if she'd been afraid I might never get out of bed again. "I'm up," I confirmed, flipping a pancake with more determination than the task required. "And I'm going to stay up." Lucas bounced into the kitchen, his face lighting up at the sight of food that wasn't cereal or a sandwich. Pancakes. "Are you feeling better, Mommy?" "I'm getting better," I said, and realized it was true. Much better. That day, I went back to work. I threw myself into my job with a focus I hadn't had in years. Numbers had always made sense to me, and I needed something that made sense while I rebuilt everything else. But work wasn't enough. I needed to process what had happened, to understand it, to transform it into something useful. So, I started writing. That at first it was just for me a way to work through the anger, the hurt, the betrayal. But as I wrote, I realized I had a story that needed to be told. Not just my story, but the story of all the women who had been lied to, manipulated, discarded. I started a blog called Surviving the Lie. The first post was simply titled How I Learned That Love Isn't Always What It Seems. I wrote about the red flags I'd ignored, the questions I hadn't asked, the ways I'd allowed myself to be deceived. I wrote about the pain of discovery, the agony of rebuilding, the slow journey back to trusting myself. The response was overwhelming. Women from all over the world reached out, sharing their own stories of deception and betrayal. I wasn't alone. I had never been alone. Within 6 months, my blog had over 100,000 followers. Women were sharing their stories, supporting each other, finding strength in our collective experience. I had accidentally created a community of survivors. That's when the opportunities started coming. A literary agent reached out about turning my blog into a book. A producer wanted to option my story for a limited series. Speaking engagements started pouring in women's groups, corporate events, universities. "You have a voice," the agent told me during our first meeting. "You have something important to say, and people want to hear it." I thought about Adam, about how he had tried to silence me, to make me small, to convince me that I was nothing without him. He had been so wrong, it was almost funny. My book, The Other Woman, a memoir of deception and redemption, became a bestseller. The TV series went into production with a major network. I was invited to speak at conferences, to appear on talk shows, to share my story with millions of people. But the most important changes were the ones that happened at home. Emma, now 15, had watched her mother transform from victim to survivor to warrior. She was proud of me in a way that made my heart ache with joy. "You're famous," she said one day, showing me a TikTok video someone had made about my book. "I'm not famous," I corrected. "I'm just sharing my story." "Your story is helping people," Lucas added, now 13 and wise beyond his years. "That's pretty cool, Mom." It was cool. It was everything. I didn't go looking for information about Adam. I didn't hire another private investigator or spend my nights scrolling through social media. I had learned to focus on my own life, my own healing, my own future. But information found me anyway. Patricia Mills called me on a Tuesday morning in spring, 2 years after Adam had disappeared from my life. "I thought you should know," she said without preamble. "I still have contacts in London. Adam Richardson's life has deteriorated significantly." I should have hung up. I should have said I didn't want to know. But I was human, and I was curious. "What do you mean?" "His wife Sarah was diagnosed with schizophrenia about a year ago. She's been in and out of psychiatric facilities. The situation became dangerous. She was having episodes, threatening the children." I felt a chill run down my spine. "The children? They're in foster care now. All 3 of them." Social services deemed the home environment unsafe. Foster care. Those children, innocent children who had done nothing wrong, were paying the price for their father's choices. And Adam lost his job 6 months ago. Apparently, his performance had been declining for a while. He's been struggling to pay for his wife's treatment, the legal fees, everything. From what I understand, he's essentially homeless now. I sat in silence, processing this information. The man who had promised me the world, who had made me believe in happily ever after, who had torn my life apart with his lies, he was now living the consequences of his choices. "I'm sorry," Patricia said quietly. "I know this is complicated." It was complicated. I should have felt satisfaction, vindication, some sense of justice served. Instead, I felt empty. His destruction didn't heal my wounds. His suffering didn't erase my pain. Thank you for telling me, I said finally. Are you okay? I'm better than okay, I realized. I'm free. 5 years later, I stood in front of a packed auditorium at Harvard University, delivering a keynote address about resilience and redemption. In the audience, I could see faces of all ages: students, professors, business leaders, survivors. My second book had just been released, and I was in the middle of a national book tour. My production company had 3 projects in development, all focused on telling women's stories that had been ignored or silenced. But more than the professional success, I had found something I hadn't even known I was looking for: peace. I was in a relationship now, a real one, built on honesty and mutual respect. David was a therapist who worked with trauma survivors, and he understood my journey in a way that felt like coming home. We had been together for 2 years, and every day felt like a choice we made together rather than a trap we had fallen into. Emma was in college now, studying journalism and fierce in her determination to tell stories that mattered. Lucas was in high school, already talking about becoming a social worker. They were both proud of who I had become, but more importantly, they were proud of who they were becoming. After my speech, a young woman approached me. She was probably in her early 20s, with tears in her eyes and a story I recognized before. She even spoke. I'm going through something similar, she said. I found out my boyfriend has been lying to me about everything. I don't know how to move forward. I took her hands in mine, feeling the familiar surge of purpose that had driven me for the past 5 years. You move forward, one day at a time, I told her, one choice at a time, one breath at a time. And you remember that his lies don't define your worth. But I feel so stupid, she whispered. How could I not have known? Because you trusted, because you loved, because you believed in the best in another person. Those aren't weaknesses, they're strengths. And they're exactly what will help you rebuild something better. She hugged me then, and I felt that familiar sense of completion. This was why I had gone through everything I had endured, not for revenge, not for justice, but for this moment, for the chance to help someone else find their way out of the darkness. That night, in my hotel room, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. From the suffocating marriage to Michael, to the devastating betrayal by Adam, to the slow, painful process of rebuilding myself from nothing. I thought about the voice I had heard in my darkest moment, the divine presence that had told me this was all a test. I understood now what it had meant. The test hadn't been about surviving Adam's betrayal. The test had been about what I would do with the pain. Would I let it destroy me, or would I let it transform me into something stronger, something better, something necessary? I had chosen transformation. Adam had taken so much from me: my trust, my sense of safety, my faith and love. But in taking those things, he had also given me something invaluable: the knowledge that I could survive anything, that I was stronger than I had ever imagined, that I had a voice worth hearing and a story worth telling. His betrayal had been the catalyst for my becoming. I didn't wish him well, but I didn't wish him ill either. He was living the consequences of his choices, just as I was living the consequences of mine. The difference was that I had chosen to build something beautiful from the ashes of my old life, while he had chosen to tear everything down. The universe had its own sense of justice, and it was more elegant than any revenge I could have planned. 10 years after that first devastating Google search, I sat in my home office, looking out at the garden where my children had played as kids and where my grandchildren would play someday. The morning light streamed through the windows, casting everything in a golden glow. I was working on my 3rd book, this one about the power of forgiveness, not the kind that excuses bad behavior, but the kind that frees the forgiver from the poison of resentment. It was the hardest book I had ever written, but also the most necessary. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Proud of you, always, I smiled, feeling the truth of those words settle into my bones. I was proud of me too. Proud of the woman who had refused to stay broken. Proud of the mother who had shown her children that falling down wasn't the end of the story. Proud of the survivor who had become a voice for others who were still finding their way out of the darkness. The doorbell rang, and I heard Emma's voice calling out that she was here with the kids. My grandchildren, 2 little girls who would grow up in a world where their grandmother had shown them that women could rebuild themselves stronger than ever. As I walked downstairs to greet them, I thought about Adam one last time, not with anger or bitterness, but with something approaching gratitude. He had been the unwitting architect of my transformation, the darkness that had taught me to appreciate the light. His deception had been my liberation. His betrayal had been my redemption. His lie had become my truth, and in the end, that was the greatest justice of all. Asterisk, they say, revenge is a dish best served cold. But I discovered something better than revenge. I discovered that the most powerful response to someone trying to destroy you is to build something so beautiful, so meaningful, so undeniably yours that their destruction becomes irrelevant. Adam thought he was writing my ending. Instead, he gave me the pen to write my beginning. And what a beginning it has been. Asterisk, sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing that ever happened to you. You just have to be brave enough to let it. Thank you for watching. How would you feel in such a situation? Share your feelings in the comments, and please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share to support more women's stories.